Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the AT&T Discovery District. My name is Joanna Campos, and I am the Senior Events and Strategist Manager for the district. This evening, I have the pleasure to announce that this is our very first speaker in the Globe series here in the district. And joining us this evening, we have 4 amazing Latino leaders that are going to share their stories and drive a very meaningful conversation. In addition to tonight, we are celebrating this event in aspect of Hispanic Heritage Month. This evening, we're also hosting Latina vendors and our employee group, HACEMOS Dallas. So I encourage you all to take some time to stop by their table and show some support. We also have our retail store that is giving you the ultimate cafecito experience, so be sure to check them out as well. With that being said, I want to welcome and kick off this evening by introducing Jay Ortiz, who has the pleasure of introducing our moderator for this evening. Jay.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jay Ortiz, and I'm with AT&T Conexión, AT&T's National Hispanic Retail Program. And I have the great pleasure of introducing our moderator for tonight's event. And let me start by telling you, she is the first Latina in AT&T's history to become a vice president and general manager in our sales and distribution channel. So round of applause for that. Really cool stuff, right? She's responsible for $3 billion market that consists of customer experience, sales, and operations. She's truly a trailblazer. She's breaking glass ceilings for Latina employees here at AT&T. Without further ado, I want to introduce to you Lynette Aguilar.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's great to see all of you here. As I said, this is our first speaker in the Globe series. For those of you who work down here, you noticed they turned the globe. I didn't know it did that, so I'm super excited. I think this might be the first time it's been turned. Yes, I'm hearing yes, this is the first time we have turned the globe. So super excited. And to come together as a community of community members, of employees, to celebrate various cultures and network. We'll head over to Jackson afterwards. And today we're doing that in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. I just want to do a mic check though, because I hear myself fighting. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, awesome. All right, well, thank you guys for being here, and thank you to the panel. We're going to have a great conversation today, so I'm going to start by introducing them. First, we have Karla Garcia. She is a Dallas ISD School Board Trustee, here to offer the education perspective. She represents District 4, which is largely southeast Dallas. And she's also worked on incredible things in her history. So she's worked on a White House initiative for education excellence for Hispanics around the country. And she's currently working, I'm sure we'll hear a little bit about this, with Dallas County Promise. It's about making education possible for all of our students. So please join me in welcoming Karla. Next to her, we have Angela Rutherford. She is a peer of mine at AT&T. AT&T is a vice president in business to offer a corporate perspective. She leads our sales organization focused on driving mobility growth in small and medium businesses across the eastern part of the U.S., and I am so proud to have her here. Angela, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And last, but certainly not least, we have Eric Jara. He's here as not only the president of our Dallas chapter of HACEMOS, our employee organization of over 1,400 Hispanics and allies in the Dallas area, but he's also the Associate Director of T University, supporting the retail organization. So Eric, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so as we get started, I have a question just to get to know our panelists a little bit better. Many of you guys know in the Hispanic community, family, community, it's so important to the fabric of our culture. So I'd love to ask each of them, how is your family, your community, how do those values influence you as a leader? And if you could provide a little bit of color about how you grew up, what's your background? So for example, I'm a second generation Mexican-American, grew up in Victoria, Texas, but I have roots in Coahuila, Mexico. And my parents were the first in both of their families to get a college degree. So we'll start with Karla, and then Angela and Eric will just go down the line. So Karla?
Yeah, awesome.
Buenas tardes. Can everybody hear me?
Buenas tardes.
Great, awesome. Mi nombre es Karla Guadalupe Garcia Rico, and yes, that is the full name that you don't typically see on the things. I am first generation Mexican American. I am the proud daughter of Mexican immigrants from Guanajuato, Mexico. And this question is particularly important to me as it relates to education, what I do today, because my parents came to this country for my education. They were not afforded opportunities because of very harsh poverty in rural Mexico, so they immigrated to the United States like a lot of families do from all over the world. I'm born in Dallas, raised in Pleasant Grove in southeast Dallas, and I now have the great honor of representing Pleasant Grove along with Balch Springs and Seagoville on the Dallas ISD School Board. I am through and through a Dallas ISD student, and the question of family is everything to me because I do everything in my professional and in my personal life in the desire to take care of my family. Because I recognize that my parents' immigration to this country was very much the sacrifice that they made on behalf of me and for my siblings. So familia es todo, familia es sumamente importante, and I, as the daughter of immigrants who has now had the privilege of accessing a college education, want to make sure that I establish my family to come in a good place to thrive in the United States. And so that's why, to me, education was that door. And in my role as a board trustee, it is my responsibility to ensure that more students have access to that here in Dallas and in our great city of Dallas. So es todo, familia es todo.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
So I'm going to follow your example with my name. Ángela María Muñiz Sánchez de Rutherford. How about that?
Right.
Okay.
Yes. There we go.
So I was born and raised in New Jersey. My parents came to this country from Spain, so española hecha y derecha, and they actually came to this country when they were in their late teens. They met and married here. I was born and raised here, but I was born and raised the same way I would have been had I been brought up and raised in Spain. My first language was Spanish. I did not learn English until I started kindergarten. Well, Sesame Street in kindergarten really helped me out, okay? And my Hispanic, my Spanish background is something I'm extremely, very, very proud of. I am the first person in my family on both sides to graduate from college. And 10 other cousins, some are still young and still going through college. But first one, and the one thing, when I think about my upbringing, my family, my culture, is two things come to mind. First thing, when it comes to family, lo dijiste, ¿no? Familia es todo. Family is everything. We take care of each other. We do everything for each other. It is absolutely everything. The other thing that I take from my upbringing and my culture is just an extremely strong work ethic. I'm second generation AT&T employee. My father started with the company in New Jersey Bell, ended up retiring from AT&T. And so as I was growing up, I watched how hard he worked to provide for us, the sacrifices that he made. And you don't realize that when you're 3, 4, 5 years old that you're taking that all in. And that is something I bring to work every single day. And as a leader, that thing about taking care of each other, that's a culture I drive on my team. We take care of each other on my team every single day, just like I was brought up in that sense with my family and my culture. So extremely proud. Española hecha y derecha y a la Madrid, if any Real Madrid fans out there.
Fantastic. Mine is not that long. I'm Eric Hara, everyone. Buenas tardes. Very impressive. But, for myself, so I'm an associate director at AT&T University and now had 18 years here at AT&T. And I've loved the opportunity that I've had to be able to help lead a fantastic chapter, HACEMOS, which is here, it's our AT&T Hispanic Latino employee group. And a little bit about my cultural background. So also first generation American, parents came here from Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, Mexico. So for those of you from Chihuahua, so I was actually born in Texas. I was born in El Paso, Texas. But then my parents, my mom specifically got a job in Silicon Valley. So I was raised in the San Francisco Bay Area my entire life. I've only lived in Dallas for the last 3 years, but Texas has grown on me. It actually brought me back. So really enjoying it. And when I think about the culture, what's interesting about me as well too is, that within my own personal family here it's actually a blend of cultures as well. So my wife is a first-generation American as well. Her parents came to this country as refugees from Cambodia. So we have the honor of raising two cultures for our sons. So we've got Mexican, Cambodian, so we've got two Mexbodian boys that we're trying to help them, assimilate into, into the culture here in America, but without losing their identity, because that's very important to us. So being able to give them, the opportunity to experience things, such as Dia de los Muertos and such as Phnom Ben, which is Dia de los Muertos for Cambodia that we just celebrated this past weekend. So being able to do that is something that, really helps me kind of, help them identify what is important to them in their life. And it's partially also why, I'm also helping with a lot of what we do with our employee group. Being able to be ambicultural, right? Being able to switch between the American culture and the Latino culture is something that has worked for me a lot in my social settings. And, over the last couple years, I've been able to use that in my professional settings as well, too. Still a little bit of work to do to be able to do that, but, being able to get the support to be my authentic self, I think really helps with that. So really excited to see what happens over the coming years.
I love it. Well, thank you all for sharing your personal history. And you guys can see there's a lot of similarities, right? Family, the sacrifice to do better, which I think is in general, right? It's something we share with a lot of cultures. But I love that you're bringing in, mixing multiple cultures as well and with your boys. I love it. All right, so I want to dive in because as you see, we've got the educational piece, the corporate piece, the employee piece that we want to talk about. So I've got a couple of questions and then we'll just have a dialogue and see where the conversation goes. But I'm going to start with a question to Angela. But let me give you guys a little bit of background. The recent census in 2020 shared that in the last 10 years, the Latinx workforce in the US increased by 36%. Right? We know that our population is growing and will be a majority population here in the next 20 years or so. But when we look at that census data, the Latinx workforce participation grew, think about these numbers, 28% in healthcare, 27% in business, so lots of opportunity for us to grow. So Angela, I'd love to get your perspective on, what changes do you think need to incur to increase representation as we think about higher levels of leadership in business, and not just AT&T, but in general, we see these gaps. Yep. What do you think needs to happen?
Well, I'll answer that question with some data first. Okay. By 2025, so think about that, we're almost in 2023, so we're not that far away, Hispanics will make up a quarter of the population in the United States. By 2050, we will be a third of the population of the United States. And in addition to that, we're changing pop culture, we're changing politics, we're changing the marketplace. Our culture, our people, we are a big part of this country, and it's going to continue to grow. But when you look at corporate America, like for example, the Fortune 500 corporations, the top leaders for those Hispanics are only 3% of those top leaders for the Fortune 500 companies. And so when you think about what we're doing in this country, how fast we're growing, and when you look at the statistics in corporate America of some of those top leadership positions, we've got a big gap. And the thing is that the corporations that don't change their strategy around Hispanics and Latinos, they will miss out on a really significant talent pool, and they will lose in the marketplace because of it. So corporations really have to change their thinking and change their strategy in order to solve for something like this. Because again, let me remind you, a quarter of the population in just over 3 years. That's pretty significant in this country. And what we need to do as individuals is be loud and proud about that. Like do things like we're doing today, be deliberate about how we are putting ourselves out there and making sure that we are a part of that change as well, and not just waiting for them to go change that for us.
Angela, I think you're absolutely right. And you gave some great statistics, and I look at the three of us as women representing our community, the stats get even lower when you think about female participation in leadership or C-suite or on the board.
That's right.
There's huge gaps, and you mentioned being loud and proud. I think that's 100% why we're here, right? And we're going to continue to have these dialogues across different cultures because I think it's important. But you're right when you think about the impact and the influence, the various flavors of the Latin communities, wherever we're from. And we obviously represent lots of different countries, lots of different generations. But the power of that influence is incredible. And when we come together, it's even more amplified.
That's right. Spot on.
I love it. Anything
Yep.
you guys want to jump in on that? I'll give you all a chance. Okay, well we'll go straight. I know we'll go straight into the next question.
Yeah.
Perhaps we'll have some dialogue around this. So, Angela just talked about the corporate perspective and some of the opportunities and the gaps that we have. Karla, we've had some discussions about this in the past. So, Karla obviously represents Dallas ISD and southeast part of the community. 75% of those families are Latino. We've talked about you're so focused through your day job, through your seat on the board, and setting up students for success, whether it's in corporate America, small business, business owners, wherever they play in the community, but getting them the access to education. So I'm curious and would love your insights on what challenges you're seeing that we're facing in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll start off with just kind of precisely where the passion for education for me starts. And I think I was called to the industry, to the field, because quite frankly, I'm enraged. I'm enraged that in a country that is so wealthy and we have so much potential in all parts of our city, we don't have access to opportunity. And so I think the saying goes, there's opportunity, talent is everywhere, opportunity is not. And so for me, in my community of Southeast Dallas, of Pleasant Grove specifically, invokes a lot of that sentiment of, I know there is so much talent of the people that I grew up with, but so few of us ever have access to the things that really help us thrive or to realize our potential to its full capacity. In Dallas ISD, our boundaries are expansive. I think we cover over 11 county lines. But there is so much work to do that starts even before a child is born, right? So the inequities that play into the education system start with the access to prenatal health care, start with access to adequate housing, start with access to nutrition at home, to having those caretakers at home. So education, when we talk about education, we're really talking about the rooted inequities in our country that we face in an education system on the day-to-day basis because a child grows up in school. And when schools aren't adequately funded, when students go home to communities that aren't adequately funded, those things exacerbate. And so we see a lot of that in our communities, and particularly in Southeast Dallas. And to me, this question of how can we make a better city of Dallas is what we're trying to do with Dallas ISD. Right. And not just Dallas ISD, but all the districts in North Texas across the country. Why it plays in particular role for Latinos is we are a district that is 75% Latino. And yet in 2019, when I ran for the board at the age of 22, I became the first Latina in its history, right? So really let that sink in, that in Dallas ISD, for the Board of Trustees, the leadership that sets the governing policies for a district, I am the first of my kind in my seat. And it makes me more upset than it does happy because it's only just now happening. And that's not the case for me in Dallas ISD. I had the privilege of meeting Latina board members from Grand Prairie, from Duncanville, and from other local school districts. And they said to me, I honor you and I celebrate you, but I'm also the first. So how are we the first Latinas in school districts that are overwhelmingly Latino in positions of leadership? But that's the same thing in the corporate world, right?
Identical.
And that has a lot to do, though, with the access to the things that, qualify us for the positions, which a lot of it is access to higher education. Well, if we really take it to higher education, then the number of Latinos accessing higher education is growing, but it's not enough. And so I can go on for days and days and days on how this starts in kindergarten, pre-K, and then, that pipeline of Latinos kind of starts to shrink, but we were just talking about the Latinas in even post-secondary degrees like PhDs and masters, and so I think we're in an opportunity right now as we become the majority to establish the real lifelines and that we need to cultivate more leadership like us. But we're there, and I'm thrilled about the potential, but let's not end there, right? I'm not satisfied with being the first and the only. I want more. Quite frankly, we need more. And not just in my board position, in the classroom, in administration, as principals, in the corporate world. So we need more of me. We need more of us. And we're just getting started. So I'll end it there. But education has everything to play with into this.
Yeah, and so you brought up a lot of things I want to dig into a little bit. As we were talking before, so I'm going to share a pipe dream of mine, maybe a passion, but I'm going to put it out there because you got to put it out there before things come into the world. So I shared with Karla earlier, I've always wanted to go get my PhD. Not because I want to leave corporate America, so don't go hear that. I'm not trying to resign, but I've always, for my own education, right, that hasn't been achieved. I've got a lot of interest there. And you told me how many Latinas have PhDs?
We're in the less than 2%, right? So we're in the 1% to 2% of Latinas in the country that have a PhD degree. And the number with master's degree, I think, covers less than 10%. And then you talk about bachelor's degrees.
Yeah.
The thing about the bachelor's degree, too, is we're outpacing our Latino men in higher education, too. Yeah. So that's a whole other conversation. But just to elaborate a little bit more on here, where education places Latina in this country is really unique because culturally speaking, I grew up in a family that doesn't have formal education, but also where women were, quite frankly, were prohibited the opportunity to be educated. And when you have educated Latinas, you're completely redefining what it means to be a brown woman in this country. And every single Latina that graduates with that high school diploma, that bachelor's degree, that master's degree, that PhD, is redefining what it means to be us as a culture in this country. And I want to continue pursuing my education, but I also want to make sure that that with my board service that we're opening again that pipeline so that more and more and more of us can get there.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I serve on the board of St. Mary's University, the business school, and I was having a conversation with the dean this afternoon, and one of the things she was telling me is enrollment is down year over year. And we were exploring the reasons for that, and if you guys rewind in 2008, right, we had an economic downturn that was pretty significant, and in the Latino community largely, but in Black and brown communities around the country, people actively chose to delay having children. Right? Because you just didn't have the economic stability to bring children into the world, and now we're seeing that play out in the education system. So there are less children of that age that are entering now, in 2021 into college. So we're seeing that decline. But in that space too, you also see first-generation college students drop out. Right? You might get scholarships for your freshman year, your sophomore year. You might be working an extra job to keep that money coming to afford your education, and then the money runs out, right? So there's also the problem of completing the education, and when you don't complete it, you still have the burden to pay back your tuition, right? Because it's just not there. Your family doesn't necessarily have the resources. So there's that hurt in the pipeline in addition to, and Karla, I think your point around the inequities began well before that, right? We've talked privately around access to broadband, right? Access to pay equality is huge gaps in our community. And one of the things, just last week that we had the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce conference in Vegas, and I wasn't able to go, but I heard a piece of it, and one of the speakers said, our community is starving for leadership, and we're waiting for her to arrive. Right? We've had men in these positions, and no offense to you gentlemen, but as you feel this insurgence of the Latinas coming in, right, and breaking the mold, their first ever, and Angela, you didn't mention this, but I bet you might be the first Latina in your position as well in the company, right? So you look at the three of us, the first ever in those seats, and it's coming. And at the same time, we've got to pull people with us.
That's right.
So I talk, those of you who have heard me talk, I preach about this all the time, but the idea of pushing up and pulling up, right? Honoring the people who've come before us, the sacrifices our family has made to give us the opportunities, that there are so many glass ceilings, like Jay mentioned earlier, we still got to bust through and then keep those doors open. So the idea of continuing to push up, but pulling people up with us. So Eric, I'm going to go to you to this next question. Angela talked about the gaps in representation in corporate America. You heard Karla talk about so many gaps in education. You have a unique seat, right? In your day job, you focus on training employees, right? In HACEMOS, in the employee group, you guys focus on employee development, professional development, so people can go through the ranks. And then you do a lot of community service and supportive education through your scholarship program. How do you see all of that coming together in relation to the dialogue we just had?
Well, it's all connected, right? In order for each of those to be successful, they each need to rise at the same time. And so, I'll start with the scholarship piece. Recently we held our scholarship banquet for our recipients. We were able to celebrate here locally 33 scholarship recipients that we're going to help ease the burden for them to be able to pay for college, right? That way, hopefully this helps them not have to make that difficult decision between having to work or go to school. I personally, that was one of the choices that I had to make when I was growing up as well too. I didn't have the opportunity to get many scholarships, and so it's one of the many reasons why I choose to volunteer with HACEMOS, because of the great work that we do. Recently, we were also celebrated at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce as the top employee group. We put out a statistic. Since the group's inception, we've given out $4 million in scholarships. And so with us being able to do that as an employee group and, bringing that here locally to Dallas, it's very important to us because, this scholarship program that we offer is great. However, we also saw that there was a need to do a little bit more. So independent of our national scholarship program, we also worked to create a separate one in partnership with the General Consulate of Mexico to be able to give more scholarships to students. And so, because it's critical, right, for the students, for our society, and for the next generation, like we're saying, that we're going to pull up as others continue to climb up. And so I think from that standpoint, it's important for us to be able to do it. And I think it's the reason why a lot of our members volunteer, right, to be able to do that. In return, they also get those opportunities to partner with other leaders in the company to be able to have the opportunities to network and work on initiatives that help with their professional development as well too. To be able to, put together a project or to be able to work side by side with other smart individuals that have similar like passions of supporting education. So I think from that standpoint, it's one of the many reasons why a lot of us volunteer. And then when we think about how this is helping us, from the professional development on the corporate side as well too, right? It's really about just making sure that those people that are within the community see that there are other opportunities, other leaders in corporate America that they can look up to, and they can say, well, you know what, maybe if they can do it, I can do it, right? Growing up, my parents always told me, my mom and my dad, right, they gave me two conflicting messages. My dad was always saying, échale ganas, right? Like, you work hard. He measured his success based on how sore his body was at the end of the day. My mom is always, ponte las pilas, right? Be smart, don't work hard, mijo. Work smarter, right? Don't work harder, work smarter. And I think by being able to do that and kind of instilling that within the groups that we all, surround ourselves with, I think that's another very important piece, which ultimately helps to, as a part to kind of share that example, that story, and be able to, break down a couple of those barriers also in corporate America, similarly to how we're trying to break down some of those financial barriers that are preventing, some of our local students access to higher education.
I love that, and I love that your parents were so intentional and they had their two different perspectives, right? And you can see both come out in what you bring to the table and your strong work ethic, but your commitment to education and working smarter. One of the things, Eric, you didn't touch on, but I'd like to go into is you talk to our employee base, and there's this idea in the Latin community of Latinos stalling from a career perspective. There's different cultural things that we were taught that we have to overcome to succeed in our perspective from corporate America, but just different challenges. What are you seeing come out in your conversations with employees? What's kind of holding them back and preventing them from getting to, entry level or middle management positions into the executive ranks?
I mean, fantastic points. I mean, I think, going back to, the way that we were raised culturally, right? Respect your elders, wait your turn. Don't challenge authority, right? Find the right time to interject. Don't be the loudest voice in the room always. And so I think from those standpoints, it's about changing those norms and being able to do kind of what our other colleagues do and be vocal, right? Share those ideas. Don't be scared to, share that idea that you had about, a different change that you see that you think would be beneficial. And when in talking to employees, that's one of the things that is part of our national development programs, being able to find opportunities to overcome that. And, as much as we can say the theory of is really the application, right? You have to hear from people that have done it, stories that you're all sharing with us today, to be able to kind of guide them. And so I think that's a very important piece that, a lot of our leaders within the company and just within, the community as well too struggle with today. We still have a lot of work to do.
So Angela, I'm going to ask you a question to follow up on that. So you have a lot of those same cultural teachings, right? Deference to authority, kind of sitting back a little bit, but you've managed to break through and get to your position. And I know employees, you talk to them all the time, right? Mentoring and guiding and developing. Could you share with the audience today how you managed to get past some of those cultural norms, but still be true to who you are when you show up at the table?
Yeah, first I want to say I find it fascinating that no matter where you come from, what your roots are as a Hispanic or Latino, we all have that same thing. Exactly, you said it best. Don't question authority. Work hard. We are all cut from that same cloth, and yet we come from different parts of the world, and have different backgrounds. But we all have that in common. What worked for me, I've been blessed to have some really good mentors in my career, and in my personal life. That were not Hispanic, and so they were the ones that were like, well, why are you doing that? Like, well, I don't know, I'm just this way. And so they would give me the feedback that I needed to hear to push me, not even make me step, but push me out of my comfort zone and change that for myself. So I feel very passionate about mentoring, and I want to be able to pay that forward to other Hispanics, other Latinos, other females, because there's another thing, Lynette, that we have to incorporate into this. Not only are we like that as Hispanics, but if you are a Hispanic woman, you're even worse. Because as women, whether you're Hispanic, whatever your background is, we have a tendency to do that to ourselves as well. For example, men are more likely to apply for a job even if they don't feel they're qualified to do it. Where women, we won't do it until we feel we're ready. And it's like a double whammy for us as Hispanic women, because we've got to fight those two things. So I want to help. I talk to employees all the time. In fact, I had a mentoring session with a first-line employee on my team today, and that's exactly what we talked about. I want to help you step out of this comfort zone so that you can reach the goals and the expectations that you have for yourself. So I'm very passionate about that. Again, paying that forward is something really, really important to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love your perspective on it's hard to put your voice out there. Right, I tell this story, I told it just this week. I remember early in my career sitting at the table, the most junior, often the only female at the table, and everybody's dialoguing, and I was sitting there.
Yes.
Right, and I was taking my notes, and I was super engaged mentally, and I didn't say a thing. And somebody took me aside, and to your point, it was somebody who was non-Latino, non-person of color, and he said, I see you thinking, and your perspective is just as valuable. And I said, with all due respect, right, you guys are the experts, you know this space. I've been in the company all of 2 years. I'll just keep taking my notes. And he called me out and he said, look, it was at break. He said, by lunch, we're going to have this discussion, but you are going to get in there and engage, and here's why. And it was the why that helped me, right? Where I was thinking I was being respectful by letting the conversation happen, that I was not honoring their decision to put me in the seat.
Yeah.
Right? I was not showing respect to them by not using that seat and using that platform. So we got back from break, and then I said, and he's staring at me. You know how that is when somebody stares at you in a meeting and they're just like, you speak up. And so I started to, and it changed the conversation, because even though I was the youngest and I didn't have as much experience, there was so much value in that perspective. So the idea of diversity of perspective has really helped me try to figure that out, right? Each of us, each of you guys have a unique perspective based on how you were raised or your educational background, your gender, your race, the culture, all of the things that make you you, including all of your work experiences. There's that value and it helps. But then we have to pull it out of people because we weren't taught that way.
Yeah.
So Karla, let me ask you, aside from we've got those inequalities to sort out, you were sharing earlier today, you're trying to get students just to register for FAFSA and get through those hurdles.
Yeah.
Much less, how do you think we can work as a community to get through some of these cultural challenges that they're in their roots, they're beautiful, but we've got to collectively figure out how to embrace them, kind of move around them a little bit to still be successful in the community, but still honor them. How do you think we should think about those issues where we just stall out?
This question is really, there's so much to say,
Yes.
but I'll start out with, I grew up with, certainly heard many times in my life, like, calladita te ves más bonita, right? You look prettier when you're quiet. But then we have a lot to say. And if there's one thing about Latinas is we love the tea. We love to say things. Pero in the space that we are now, in the seats that we occupy, you just can't, we don't have time to wait. You don't have time to wait when you look at the statistics of how it really is at home, right? So I look at Pleasant Grove, and the reason why I got involved on the board was I can't sit at night knowing that less than 3% of my community has at least an associate's degree or higher, right? What does that mean in terms of the median income in the household? What does that mean for the family of 5 upstairs who may or may not have something to eat at night? What does it mean for the undocumented family who's too afraid to ask questions, and they do in fact qualify for state financial aid and could go to college, for a student that is perfectly capable of thriving in college, right? So I think as Latinas, as the Latino community, we just don't have time to wait. And it makes no sense that given our potential and given the sacrifices and given the pain of our community, that we aren't advancing and pushing and quite frankly, demanding more. Yeah. So I'm happy and proud to hear of the first, but again, I think you speak it well to say that my obligation and my responsibility doesn't end at I've made it. There's still a lot more work to be done, and it's not going to end with me. It's going to end until, what's that Supreme Court justice? It won't end until it's all 9 women, right? And I'm not talking about women taking over the world, but I'm just saying that you're missing such a critical component of what could be the richness, la riqueza, el sabor almost even of the conversation when you involve the missing voices. And my understanding is that we're still missing everywhere, right? And we're here. Estamos aquí. We're not going to go. This is home. This is ours. Es nuestro. And we've only so much more to contribute to it. And it's going to involve. Another point I'll make really quickly is too how young of a community we are, right? By median age of Latinos in this country is younger than our other ethnic groups in the country. So there's a long way to go. And I think that just speaks to the potential. Again, I keep going to the word potential because we really are the untapped potential of our city of Dallas, in Southeast Dallas, but really of this country. And there's just, hay mucho que hacer, hay mucho trabajo por hacer. And if there's anything that we do very well is we work very hard, right? That's instilled within us. And so I work hard to honor the sacrifice that was made for me, but it's still just, quite frankly, the dire need that's before us.
Ya es tiempo.
Yeah.
Ya es tiempo.
Estamos aquí. Yeah.
I love it. And one of the things that I think about when you talk about potential, and Eric, I don't want to leave you out, but I got real tied into this topic of Latinas, the buying power of the community. It's what, like $4 trillion? And most of those decisions are being made by the women in the families. right? So regardless of what the family dynamic looks like, it's the woman who's spending the money. And it may not be as large as some other families, but there is money to be spent. And so adding to the community and keeping the community going is largely there.
I'm a prime example of that, by the way. That's me. That's me.
Own it. Own it.
But imagine how much more powerful it would be if we were paid as much as our counterparts, right? So we still don't get paid what we deserve to be paid for the work that we do.
100%.
And many of us are head of households. And that buying power would only grow, and not just buying power, because money is more than just buying power. Money dictates a lot of things, and so as our community grows wealthier, and I prefer the word wealth because I think, quite frankly, that's what an education can allow us, the Latino community, to do. But education isn't the only way. That's to say that earning degrees isn't the only way that our community has built wealth, right? I have parents that don't have degrees of higher education, but have very much set myself, my siblings, to be able to thrive in different ways. And Latinos don't just go into higher education. We start businesses. We're entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of things to contribute to the wealth of this country and to our families that we can still do a lot more of.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And I know people who don't speak the English language and are ridiculously wealthy because they've been able to create businesses that are thriving in the community, and then they give back, right? When they're spending back in the community, right? Gas in the local gas station, right? They're stopping at the local tienditas. They're going to all the mercados and giving back to the community and keeping it, and that's where it starts multiplying. But Karla, I love that you brought up pay inequality. So AT&T does a really nice job of this. But if you look in the broader community, the head of the Fed, the Federal Reserve in Dallas, shared with me a couple of weeks ago that Latinas, well, in general, people of color are paid less, right? It's a fact. Latinas typically make 55 cents on the dollar. Again, AT&T does a really nice job and has made a ton of great strides in pay equality across the board. But I know I do not work, nor have I ever worked 55% as hard or put in 55% of the effort or delivered 55% of the results as my male counterparts. So talk about getting enraged, right? For me, that's where, if the work was colorblind, and it should be, we should be able to close that gap.
Absolutely.
Great.
There's work to be done. All right, well, let me ask another question, kind of to start wrapping us up a little bit, but we still have time, so don't feel rushed. There is so much work to be done. We talked about, tiempo, right? The community is on the verge and has the potential of uprising and adding into the community and pushing the community and helping the community thrive. I'd love to hear from each of your perspectives. What's something we can do as a community, as education, as AT&T employees? What call to action would you have for those in the audience today? So I'll start with you, Karla, and then we'll go down the line.
Actually, for this one, I'd rather go last.
Okay, you can go last. We'll start with Eric.
Okay, Eric.
Sounds good. I think about an example, a story, an interaction between me and my dad. A couple years back, there was a proposition that had to vote to give more money to some of the local schools. And I remember having this conversation with my dad. I assumed that he was in favor of it because in the community where he lives back in California, predominantly Hispanic. And so I was under the assumption, he's going to go for this proposition, gives more money to the local schools. But he said, I'm not going to vote for that. Why would I do that? You kids are out of school already, right? You guys aren't here. I'd rather save my money or put it somewhere else. And so, it took me back because, I was here thinking like, okay, I'm extremely passionate about supporting my community. But my dad isn't, so why? And so I'm a natural, I'm very inquisitive to find out what's the root, what's that issue. And so ultimately it's just, he said, well, I'd rather give my money to those that matter most. But I said, Dad, your community is what should matter to you, right? Because that money is going to go to the schools for your future doctors that you're going to go for your doctor visits, right? For those lawyers in case you get into a car accident. It could be even just for the person that's, there within the local school district. I mean, that money goes to help you and to help all of us get better. And so when I think about that, it really just continues to resonate with me because it's the reason why my call to action for everyone would be do your best to try to get involved within your local community. Of course, I'm coming a little biased because I'm the president of an employee group, right? But I think naturally everyone should really be focused on those that are around you, right? Because once those people around you thrive, whether they're in your personal circle or not, all of us end up being more successful, right? End up getting more of the wealth like you're talking about. So, I think that's what it is for me. Find a way to intentionally engage. I don't mean, give, $10 to this donation here or to, volunteer 1 hour here. Like, all that is great. Do not get me wrong, but find something that you're truly passionate about where you can give some of your time, effort, and maybe even in some cases money as well too, to give back to those that don't have the opportunity to be able to go to school or to be able to support their family or to be able to fill out a FAFSA application, right? Being able to do those things. So find a way to intentionally engage in your community for whatever it is that you find passionate about. So that's what I would say.
So I'm going to ask for forgiveness later, but I have 3 things, if that's okay.
I want to hear them all.
Okay, perfect. So the first one, you said it earlier, the push-up, pull-up thing.
Yes.
We all have to do that. Be deliberate about that. And it doesn't matter what position you're in, what you do for a living, whether you're in corporate America or in education, wherever you are, pushing up and pulling up we all have to go do that. We have to be a part of the change. And a great way to do that is by pushing up and pulling up. The second thing is when I came into this position, I can't tell you the amount of emails and texts and communications that I received saying, oh my God, this is so amazing. We finally have a Hispanic, a Latina in an executive role in this part of our business. And what I took away from that was, wow, like people are really paying attention to that. They're going to watch every move I make. They're going to watch everything they're going to listen to everything I say. And that's a responsibility that I take very, very seriously because I want to, like I said before, pay things forward. Things that people did for me, I want to be able to do that for others. And so regardless of the position that you are in, and you don't have to have a title to be a leader, but be a leader, represent our community, and be the change that needs to happen so that we can look at ourselves, in 2050, the year 2050, when we are 1/3 of the population, and say, look how far we've come. Be the change. And the last thing I'll say is you actually inspired me about something, listening to you, the way you answered the first question. And there's a generation of little ones out there. And we've got to take that generation very, very seriously. They are the up and coming Hispanics and Latinos in our communities. And to your point, be very deliberate about how you engage and what you do in the community to help that generation. There's a lot of talent, there's a lot of goodness that's there, and we've got to take it upon ourselves to nurture that and do something with those children that are the future of our culture. So those are my 3 things.
Love it. Thank you.
Awesome. I guess the reason why I asked to go last is because of all the many things I have to think about, but particularly like this question about what we can do as a community as a whole. To me, I would obviously not be in my seat if I wasn't voted into my seat. So you have a huge, huge opportunity to change outcomes when you vote, and you are an informed voter.
You have my vote, by the way.
Gracias. Well, yes, thank you. Which brings me to say that we are in the middle of redistricting, as you know, by the census data. So the landscape of politics in the state of Texas will change. They're actually going to change for our DISD too. And we don't have enough Latinos, Hispanics in positions of leadership. So one of the kind of concerns that I had was I can be an advocate and I can, fight for things my entire life, or you can become the decision maker. And I think that's what positions of leadership why they're so critical, because I'm now in a position to make decisions that will affect students for generations to come. I mean, that's the impact of your local school board, but how many of us know about our local school board or even vote in school board elections? Voting in the city of Dallas is dismal, and even more for school boards. And the budget for DISD, by the way, if you didn't know this, is $2.3 billion. We just passed the single largest bond in the history of Texas public schools, sitting at around $3.1 billion, and that's going to impact students for 20 more years to come. So vote. I think second of all, too, is that I'm going to go back to a poem that I read in 6th grade, which was something along the lines of, when you shine, you give others permissions to light as well, right? So when you realize your full self, you give me permission to do the same, right? I see you being successful in the corporate world. My gosh, why couldn't I, right? Why couldn't I also be successful in the worlds and the spaces that you occupy? So I think that's one thing, but in terms of just changing the outcomes for Latinos in the state of Texas and across the country, we've got to be in positions of leadership. Yeah. Politics plays a huge role in the future of our country. Our local community of wealth in our schools, in the workplace, and a lot of other things. So vote, be an informed voter, and heck, if you're the person, run for office. Run for office.
Ooh,
run for office.
Oh, and vote.
And vote.
So name on the ballot or vote?
Both.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Well, guys, I'm going to pull this panel to a close. There's so much more we should dig into and can dig into. So I'm going to encourage all of you guys to continue the dialogue, right? Hispanic Heritage Month isn't over, but we each play a part. I look out in this crowd, there's lots of different groups that are represented here today. So I want to thank all of you guys for coming and hearing so many great pieces, right? Everything from celebrating our culture. I loved the shout outs to the family, right? Who encourage you to education and to do better. I think about, as you're talking about children, my children, right? And as they look at the world and as they experience the world, it's different than when we were growing up. Yet in our community, I see the inequities that you talk about, Karla, right? There's the local DISD school. There is a food pantry on the corner 3 blocks from where I live. And I see it is in constant use. So the need is there. So I would challenge all of you guys to watch. Be aware of the community, and those of us that work here in this building, right? Remember that in the shadow of our building, there are homeless shelters, right? And in all of our communities, there are gaps that we have the opportunity and frankly, the obligation to lean into. Be the positive role models. And Karla, you're talking about FAFSA, so I want to end on this, right? There are parents who want better for their children that don't have the know-withal that we do. Yeah. Right? And I think a great opportunity for HACEMOS, and we're about to go celebrate, so we should talk about this, is how we can help, right? How we can help Karla in the schools, fill out those forms, get our children into higher education so that we can change things, right? And fulfill the potential of the community. Yeah. So I can't thank you enough for sharing your time, your energy, your perspective. Audience, thank you guys for being here. And I'm going to, one more thank you. Things like this don't just happen. So to all of you who worked behind the scenes, you know who you are. Thank you for the vision of pulling this together. Thank you for pouring your hearts into pulling this off. We appreciate you. Thank all of you. So with that, I will turn it over to Jay to close us out.
How about a round of applause? Yeah. Hey, so as Joanna mentioned, right, so this is the first of many speakers in the globe, so be on the lookout for many more. Following this, we are going to have a cafecito experience, so if you want a cold brew, feel free to stop by the experience store right behind me. We also have really awesome Latina vendors out there that have some really cool products, so stop by over there. And then our HACEMOS group, right, that we spoke about with Eric, we have a member networking mixer at Jackson, free appetizers, FYI, okay? So stop by. That is it. Please, panelists, stay right here. We're gonna take a quick picture. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.